Do you find sometimes that your clients struggle with adherence, the act of actually sticking to something? Today, I'm sharing why your client isn't following through and how to help them begin to execute. Hey, I'm Amanda, and welcome to the Best Damn Coach podcast, where I will teach you how to coach yourself, how to coach your clients, and how to run your coaching business. The number one goal of this show, though, is to help you be the best damn coach you can be so your clients go out and tell the world about you. So, let's do the damn thing. Hey coaches, before we get started on this week's episode, I want to let you in on a brand new training for you that is now live. I've been working on this behind the scenes and I'm so excited to bring it to you starting now. The coaching industry is saturated. There are so many people out there doing what you do. So the question is, how are your people going to find you? In this live training, I'm going to break it down for you simply. So if you're a coach who wants to grow their coaching business without spending all of this unnecessary money on marketing and Instagram ads and Facebook, if you're a coach who sometimes has doubt and imposter syndrome, like how are my people going to find me? Is this really something I can do to break that 6-figure mark? And if you're a coach who really just wants to be so amazing for your people and help them create results, but most importantly, you're a coach who wants to be found by your dream clients, then come join this free training where I'm going to walk you through the 3 steps necessary to make this happen so you can stand out in a crowded market. So head on over to amanda-walker.com/masterclass, and you can pick the time that best works for your schedule and learn how to stand out so that your dream clients can find you. Hello, friends. Welcome to this week's episode. And today I'm diving into why your client isn't following through. You might be really frustrated because you feel like you're giving great coaching and you've created this action plan for your client. Then they leave this session and they don't take action. You're like, what's happening? I also want to say that this could be you. You could be the one not following through. And you're like, dang it, I know what I want, but it doesn't seem like I can actually go out and make it happen. And so when I share more about today and some of the details around lack of follow through, I want you to wear the hat for yourself because you may see that this is showing up in areas of your life as well. One of the greatest challenges as a coach is adherence. And adherence is really just the idea of somebody sticking to something. There's an entire line of research-based evidence that focuses on this one thing, by the way, adherence. I mean, this is why I truthfully started diving deeper into my toolbox and wanting to learn more about adherence and about why clients weren't following through after starting. When I first started business, right, I was specifically doing macro coaching. And so I would give my clients an amazing macro designation, right? I studied them. Inevitably, I knew this would bring them the success. And then when I would give them, they would go take action consistently in the beginning, or maybe not at all. And then I would just be so curious if they told me they wanted this thing and they articulated and vocalized it out loud, why is it that they're not following through? And I could also see this in glimmers of my own life as well. It's largely, from my perspective, the single most important aspect of coaching. And no matter what niche or topic or content, no matter who you're supporting, you support your client in following through, and taking action for them is where I think they're always going to need the greatest support. And so today I'm going to share 3 reasons your client may not be following through, and I'm going to give some solutions to support so you can help increase adherence with your clients. This is the opportunity you have to dive deeper into your coaching toolbox. This is the opportunity you have to help cultivate results so that your client then says, wow, my coach met me where I am at. They could see I wasn't taking action. I was struggling with the follow through. And when that happens, remember the goal is word of mouth referrals is the most amazing way to secure clients. And so when we're able to go deeper and not just take it for surface level, then we are able to cultivate true transformation and success with our people. And that is the goal, right? That is the goal. I mean, that's why inside the BDC, we do so much work around this, is because we know that the client may struggle when they go out to take action. And that's where we want to make sure we have a toolbox that's deep and rich and robust so we can understand them better. So like I said, adherence, it simply means sticking to something. And so we want to help our clients stick to the solutions that we help them create. This topic is complex. While I'm going to just talk about 3 areas today, I also think there's likely, depending upon the person, other things that may be influencing the client's ability to follow through, like their environment, like their support system. But what I want to dial down is to the 3 things that we can control as coaches, the 3 areas that we can support them as coaches, because everybody's unique butterfly, right? And I never coach 2 clients the same way. I might have the same content, but they need to hear it differently. They need to have it in a different order, perhaps. They need to hear it in different ways, right? So that is something that you will grow as you coach more people and understand what their unique differences demand of your specific skill set. Like I said before, put the hat on for yourself as I talk about these reasons, because you may find yourself inside of them as well. So here we go. Reason number 1 that your client may not be following through is you actually don't have rapport with them. There's a lack of rapport that exists inside the coaching relationship. So we'll talk about rapport for a second. Rapport is kind of this idea that like people or like stuff begets more of the same. So this would be if you've ever been at a networking event or something like this and you walk and you meet several people and then all of a sudden you just jam with somebody. You just feel like this energy, this synergy. And what's often cultivated in that situation is unconscious rapport. They're similar to you. Maybe you found out you went to the same college or you grew up in the same city, right? That's verbal rapport where we connect with our words. But the other aspects is sometimes we just have an affinity, or we do, not sometimes, for people that are like us in different ways. Sometimes it's conscious, like we see their outfit, and we're like, oh, she looks like my style. Or we see that they have children and we're like, oh, I'm a mom, right? And those are conscious things where we're like thinking we're like. However, there's also unconscious components of this. I teach so much of this inside the BDC, but this is something like physiology. This is tonality. This is the speed for which we talk. This might be why some of you love to listen to me, because you hear the tone of my voice and it sounds soothing and it sounds connected and content. Other people might hop on and listen to my podcast and say, whoa, I just do not like the tone of her voice. You may have done that before. Sometimes when I download an audiobook, I will have great intentions of listening to it, but the rapport is not there with the person's voice. And so I just can't actually listen to it on audio and I have to read it. So it's a great example of unconscious rapport. And in our sessions, we can break rapport with clients through verbal ways. Maybe we say something to them that really didn't land with them well, and we don't know it. They don't communicate that to us, but there's something that we said there that broke rapport. And often what that creates is a lack of trust. And so the client, while could be unconscious, is kind of like, well, I don't know if what they just gave me is the best way, or I don't know if I really feel that it matters if I am successful. And so there's many ways, I'll talk about the solutions shortly, to regain rapport, but also to be mindful of rapport from the start. This is even on Zoom coaching sessions, which the majority of my coaching still is being mindful of building rapport from the start and being mindful of building rapport in every single coaching session, because we do not know what the client is bringing into the session, where they just came from. And we want to ensure that the rapport is there, and that when we leave the conversation and we've given action steps, that they feel confident in their ability and in trusting you to make it happen. I think this is something that most coaches don't even realize exists. Obviously, that's why I want to bring it to the surface. I'm sure you've had it in your life before where somebody gives you a suggestion. I'll give a great example of this. Recently, I was at a networking event and I was talking to a gentleman. He was probably in his 60s. And as I shared what I did, he started giving me advice around my business unsolicited. We had no rapport. He was just talking. His body language did not match mine. He was loud. It was a little bit overwhelming for me. And so it was a lot of kind of want. So what he was not aware of is the idea to build rapport first. And this is such a powerful way to be really successful when you're in networking situations, is to understand rapport more deeply and to use it to your advantage, not just in coaching, but in life, even to build rapport with your spouse. A great example would be if Justin, it's bedtime, and I mean, we'll just go TMI here, but it's bedtime and I'm like exhausted. And all of a sudden he's like, let's have some sexy time. And he hasn't talked To me, he hasn't established a connection before. It's like went from 0 to 10 really fast. Then this is also a great example of just rapport in relationships. We want to make sure that we've established rapport before moving into a next level of connection. Reason number 2, your client is struggling to follow through or might be, is something called cognitive dissonance. This also could be intrusive thoughts. This could sound like, I hear it so many ways. For me, this is a gap between our conscious and unconscious mind. And cognitive dissonance, by the way, has been a term around. I honestly didn't look up the origin of this term and when it was identified. It is a term used in therapy and study of psychology to explain the gap between basically what our clients' thoughts are, their values, their actual words, and their behaviors. The goal is to get these things to line up. If they say they want something, then we want to try to help them get their behavior to align with that. I've also shared more deeply around the conscious and unconscious mind. The conscious mind is the goal setter. It says, I want to grow a 6-figure business. I want to be a speaker on a stage in front of 1,000 people. I want to be a wonderful mother. That's not a tangible result, but you get the idea. And while that is important, we want something to be the goal setter. The unconscious mind, which holds our thoughts, our values, our belief systems, if that is not in congruence with our thoughts, in other words, underneath it, if there's thoughts that say, you're not suited for that, you don't know enough, you're not good enough, you're not worthy, people are going to judge you. If all of that's happening underneath and it doesn't feel safe to pursue the goal, then there is dissonance, which means there is a gap between those two things. This is probably the most important part of coaching, in my opinion. And this is where I personally, in the beginning of coaching, I've coached for forever, but I wasn't ever taught to go a little bit deeper and start to lift up the hood of the car and say, what's the engine? What's happening in the engine and all the other parts here? And so when we see this happening, you guys, this should be a red flag for you, for your client. If they're saying something and doing another, that's because there is some sort of gap existing. A lot of times this gap is actually time. A lot of times it's the belief that I don't have time to actually contribute, that this is going to take so much time, especially in our culture today where we're ping-ponging all over the place. We're really juggling a lot of balls that we tell ourselves are glass and really aren't. So sometimes it's not even a necessarily imposter thought. It's more a belief that I don't actually have time to give to this thing. So this is why we have to lift up the hood and we have to go deeper. We have to start asking questions, which I'm going to get to in just a little bit. I think this is the most common reason I don't see clients following through, which is fantastic to know because now you know. Now you can go, oh yeah, I remember that episode. This is a red flag. What can I do to get some clarity as to why this is specifically happening? And reason number 3 that your client isn't following through is there might be secondary gain. So what is secondary gain? It's essentially when there is something to be gained by not changing. So there is something more worthwhile for not changing than for changing. And sometimes secondary gain is conscious and sometimes it is unconscious. And I'm going to give 2 client examples that are going to put this more clear so you understand the value of what's happening. This is a little bit more challenging to sniff out. When it comes, it takes a little bit more practice. And once you start to see it inside of your clients, you're going to be able to identify it faster, call it out, and be able to shift it to the surface as a limiting decision and get rid of it. Thank goodness. So I'm going to give 2 examples. First is I was working with a client who was coming to me for weight loss. And I noticed a lot of lack of implementation, lack of results. And so I started to sniff out, asking all these questions. And fast forward, what we were able to detect was that the last time this particular client was at her most fit self, she was most confident in her body. She also had infidelity in her marriage. So she had decided to pursue a relationship outside marriage, which to this day, I don't know to what degree that even means. It's irrelevant to me. All I knew was that there was secondary gain for her that we were able to identify because in her unconscious mind, the fear is, well, if I get back to my most fit self, then the possibility that I will be unfaithful exists again. And so she unconsciously was self-sabotaging, and we were able to bring it to the surface. It was like, wow, that's not true. First off, you are in control of those decisions. And so we had to help her see that, to get over that and to gain some momentum forward. The second example was a client, and this is just such an amazing thing to unpack with her. She would go through kind of emotional roller coaster bouts. Her husband is a successful, busy man. And what she was able to identify with me is that the most attention that he would ever give her was when she was at the bottom, right? The bottom of the roller coaster, when she had hit her valley instead of her peak. And so it's at that moment that, he would give her attention, and she felt like connection to him. And so there was a gain for her of not changing, right? Of continuing to have these roller coasters instead of being consistent, because then her thought is, well, is he going to give me attention? And again, these are unconscious sometimes. So we have to just keep digging in with our clients to find out, is this true or not? So we were able to help her see that that's not true, in fact. And we gave her steps to bridge connection and to create connection with her husband outside of those, so she could build trust in herself to see we can be totally connected, and it has nothing to do with where my emotions are in the moment. So this is the power of secondary gain and identifying secondary gain. So again, those 3 reasons potentially, and I want to reiterate that adherence is not necessarily mean one of these 3 things are happening. Could be all of them, could be none of them, and it could be another complex element. Like I said, all clients are unique butterflies. And so it's important to understand and treat each client as an individual. So lack of rapport, cognitive dissonance, and possibility of secondary gain. So once we can identify this, the question is, how do we support our clients to overcome this? The most important part is just to have awareness. You have to have an awareness as a coach. And if you see this in yourself, the same thing. First step is awareness. And then we start asking questions. We start asking deep level questions. By the way, if you want support with questions, I have a great freebie. You can go to amandawalker.com/questions. I give you 10 questions that are literally just a really common use inside of my coaching. And this will help you go deeper. Something is, why do you think that happens? Why do you feel like you're not able to execute? What's coming up when you do try to execute? And then you have to put this curiosity hat on, which is step 2. You have to be curious. You have to become a client scientist at this point and really start asking your client questions and just starting to piece together puzzles. And sometimes just by asking the questions and them starting to share their words out loud, they begin to go oh my gosh, I never saw this happening. And when we bring it into conscious awareness, this is when the client is more mindful, right? Because then they go back to real life and they start to see these behaviors. And when they're in the midst of these behaviors, they begin to catch themselves and start to ask some of those questions. And our goal as coaches, in my opinion, is to help our clients become their best self-scientists, right? Their best self-coaches. And we need to help bridge the gap for them in the beginning sometimes to help them be curious. Next one, part number 3. How else do we help them? Well, here's what we don't do, is we don't do the work for them. You might be tempted and they may say, I don't know how, I don't know what steps to take. I believe the worst thing we can do for them is try to execute for them. We can facilitate, we can guide, we can give them prompts, we can give them suggestions, but we cannot go in and do the work for them because they will not be successful long term. And I think sometimes we're maybe a little bit thinking that we should be doing this. We want to because we want them to have success and we don't want to make it mean anything about ourselves. So we're like, we're just going to jump in, we're going to help execute, and we're going to do some of these things for them. And ultimately they suffer in the long run. And that's because they don't figure out how to become independent and to go out and execute behaviors on their own. And ultimately, if they don't have long-term success, then they're not going to be singing your praising you from afar for years to come and saying, you need to work with her. You need to go talk with her. And this is where we as the practitioner have to really step back and ask ourselves, why are we doing this? Are we here for the long term? Are we here for the short term? Or are we here for surface results or deep transformation? And only you get to make that decision on what that looks like. So again, what are the solutions? First, we create awareness. Then we ask questions. We stay curious and we don't do the work for them. Understand that our clients not following through has nothing to do with us specifically. One of the struggles is we give meaning to what, we suck as coaches, we suck as practitioners, we're not doing enough, we're not saying enough. And what I want you to know is just use that as motivation to get more curious and ask those questions, right? This is your opportunity to really show up for your client and to understand that it is normal and a part of coaching when adherence is not 100%. Right. And I'm always kind of curious in the beginning, if somebody's like 100% on, I'm always kind of like, what's going to come up here? Right. And about 30 to 60 days in is where we really start to see some of those limiting beliefs and some of those reasons show up as far as lack of execution. And that's where the juicy work begins. And that's where we can really impact the lives of our clients over the long term. So I hope this episode continues to support you to be the best damn coach you can be. And if you ever have any questions, please feel free to send us an email at support@amanda-walker.com. We're happy to support you. Send me a message on Instagram @awalkmyway and go out and coach your people with confidence. Every week, I put my heart and soul into this podcast to bring you value and to help you grow as a person and as a coach. And one of the ways, very simple ways you can return that favor is by leaving us a review. So if you haven't left us a review, head on over to Apple or Spotify, leave us a review, let us know how we're doing, let us know what content you love and which content pieces are really speaking to you now.